now switch our attention to problems with weapons that the UK in particular has put into Ukraine, because of course we've put in a lot of depleted uranium ammunition for the Challenger tanks that have gone in. And a few days ago we showed on screen this massive explosion as the Russians targeted a ammunition dump. This is clearly hundreds, maybe 1,000 tons of ammunition exploding. But what was to emerge was the fact that there were suggestions that this actually had been a very targeted Russian strike on the ammunition dumps that included the depleted uranium. Now, interestingly enough, over recent days, Russia, this was on the 19th of May, put out this report, Russian watchdog addresses radioactive cloud reports. And in the article, which is from Russia Today, it says that radiation levels in Russia are normal, but a radioactive cloud, I'm going to say, is allegedly heading for the west. And this has come about because many think that depleted uranium rounds were destroyed in that explosion. Now, I'm very pleased to say that we've got some very well-qualified individuals who've started to alert the Western world about the possibility of fallout from depleted uranium weapons destroyed in this explosion. And I'm delighted to welcome on to the UK column Dr. Depti Bisht, who's going to take us through some of her findings. Before I welcome her on screen, we'll just show you this other slide, which is from her unit, which is warning about these radiation surges. And we'll also just have a look at this little clip, which is from Dr. Bisht herself, talking about why there is a possible problem. So let's just play this clip.
Hello. On behalf of UNIT, I would like to issue an alert to the residents of Ukraine, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, and East Germany that a significant amount of radiation has been detected by radiation monitors in these areas. Upon preliminary investigations, a significant surge in gamma ray dosage has been timed with the declared targeting of sites that were storing the Western-supplied ammunition in Ukraine. At least 3 spikes in radiations were identified in the last 2 weeks through data which was evaluated by UNIT. It is therefore our responsibility to issue a radiation warning to the European residents, especially in areas conterminous to Ukraine.
Well, there we are, a very succinct little video setting out what the problem is. So let's welcome Dr. Bisht with the UK column today. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Brian. Glad to be here.
Okay. Now, the first thing I want to say is that a few nights ago, you were kind enough to invite me into a Zoom meeting where you had several very highly qualified professionals, both people qualified at professor level to do with radiation, fallout problems, but also security and military experts. And that team were clearly very, very concerned about what has happened. Are you able to just tell us a little bit about UNIT itself and what this group of people is trying to achieve?
Yes, thank you, Brian. UNIT is essentially an exclusive defense and intelligence organization. Very briefly, we are looking out for the people because the normal 3- and 4-lettered agencies are not able to do their job. So 3 years ago, I went around and not recruited is not the right word, but essentially, had a coalition of basically highly qualified people within the military and from around the world, and whose sole concern is essentially what the world has come to at present with regards to what happened with COVID and now with Russia and Ukraine. So basically the West is not looking out for the interests of its own people, and that is where our concern begins, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Well, if we pop the first slide on screen, and these are your slides, so thank you very much for providing these for the news today. But this one is Western ammunition depot hits and related radiation spikes. I've added the red arrows to show some of the points at which the Russians were targeting Ukrainian infrastructure, clearly including ammunition depots. And then on the left of screen, we've got a number of little green diamonds indicated by the green arrow. And these are some of the monitoring stations. So over to you. Tell us a bit more about what you put together on this slide and why.
Thank you, Brian. So yes, you're right. On the right side, so basically we are monitoring the situation in regards to public health in any matter. So it could be, nuclear in this instance. So we are monitoring the radiation levels that are being reported at various sites, essentially. And in May, so the slide is actually a summary of May until now. So you've got the reported in red stars, you've got the reported ammunition depot hits by the Russian Federation. And you're right, on the left side of the slide, you've got the sensors. So these are monitoring daily. So every hour we've got reading, essentially. And these are from the European monitoring system. So the idea is essentially to identify any surge in gamma radiation. So these are gamma ray sensors, and they pick up any spikes in the gamma rays, which stands out from the background. So that's what it is. Yes. So if you've got a spike in gamma rays, then you've got some sort of a surge in radioactive material circulating in the atmosphere.
Okay, Dr. Bisht, thank you for that. And if I remember correctly, these monitoring stations in Eastern Europe are EU monitoring stations which were established after the Chernobyl disaster. Is that correct?
Yes, you're right, Brian. So they were installed. There's a very dense network, especially in France and Germany. Poland is well covered, Hungary too. Quite sparse in some of the countries, but most of the European countries would have that. And yes, you're right. It was in the wake of Chernobyl disaster. So.
Okay, thank you for that. And the other thing, which I'm not going to bring up on screen, but I think is important for our viewers and listeners to understand, is, of course, if you look at the wind flow patterns over Ukraine, the prevailing wind is a southeasterly wind, so it's moving up to the northwest. But the interesting thing is that when that airflow moves over Poland, it then deviates down to the south. So it curls down over Hungary and towards Bosnia-Herzegovina. So it's largely the eastern sector of what we call Western Europe, but down into Hungary and those areas. And you have then been able to look at some of the detailed data, just a selection here, but take us through what these slides are showing us.
So yes, and thank you for that. So this one is Khmelnytskyi, and so what you're saying on the x-axis are the dates. So and then you've got wiggly graphs. On the y-axis, you've got the dose rates of the gamma rays. So how we read it, I mean, in very simplistic terms, is essentially there's a background radiation which is always there, and which is actually caused by the geology, with soil, with rocks, but also with civilian structures, with storms, and so on and so forth. However, in this slide, you see that there are distinct two spikes. And these actually correlate with the timing of the explosions that were actually recorded in terms of Khmelnytskyi. Sorry for the pronunciation, but that's the 13th of May explosion, but also with other explosions that were declared by the Russian Federation. So you've got a distinct peak. Can't read the dates on this one, but I think that's the 15th, and then you've got the 18th or 17th. So you've got those two peaks, and that means there is a surge of radioactive material swirling around in the atmosphere, and that is clearly quite dangerous for the health of the people. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, let's bring the other two up on screen. So this is the next one, and we've got a very similar peak on the 18th and back on the 15th.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, indeed. I mean, so this pattern, Brian, is consistent all over Poland. So you've got a distinct peak on the 17th, and then before that you've got it on the 15th, and even before that there are some peaks that are on the 6th. So we are seeing these consistent surges all over a very vast geographic area, which is Poland, Hungary, and Slovakia, and also the eastern borders of Germany. So this is clearly a regional signal. It is not something that can be explained by anything else other than the timing of the ammunition depots being hit.
Okay, yeah. Thank you for that. We'll pop the last one up on screen. So you took, I think it was over 30 sampling sites altogether in your analysis. So we're only giving the audience a brief bit here. But this was the other one. Any comments on this one?
Yes, so you see that in this one, actually, you've got Radom didn't record the previous week, was not very clear, and here you can see the data quality is not that great, yet the peaks do stand out, and you can't debate it. I mean, there's literally, it's as clear as daylight, essentially, that there has been something going on around those dates.
Okay, thank you for that. Something else I remember is one of the qualified professors said until actual dust debris samples can be obtained, it's still difficult to actually pin it down to the depleted uranium. However, the risk of these sampling sites speaks for itself. You made some conclusions. I don't know whether you're able to take us through these on screen. If not, I'll help you out and read it for you.
No, thank you, Brian. Just to comment on what you said earlier, when we had the meeting, I hadn't done a full technical, review. Now that whole review is finished, and we can conclusively state that whether it was depleted uranium or not, we don't know. But there was a significant amount of uranium present, which is radioactive, essentially. So we're looking at, if we take the conclusion slide, there are 3 peaks we observe. So we observed the first peak around the 6th of May, and that would be, a result of an undeclared hit, which we do not know which one it is, essentially. And then we see 2 distinct peaks on the 15th, and 15, 16, that's one cluster. And then we see it on 17th and 18th. Whether the 17th and 18th are 2 separate incidences or not, we cannot say. However, there are 3 distinct peaks within the month of May, and what it means for public people who do not understand, all the science behind it. But it's suffice to say that there is so much material that has been injected in the atmosphere in a very short period of time that it is of great concern for us. And we would like to issue, again, reiterate the warning that, guys, this is a public health emergency, essentially.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, you had a final comment here, conclusion. I'll read it very quickly. In summary, UNIT concludes that the cumulative amount of radioactive material which has been released into the atmosphere as a result of military strikes on Western supplied radioactive material enriched ammunition is a direct threat to the health of the public in Ukraine, Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, and East Germany. And of course, what you are really asking for is proper investigation by the pertinent authorities.
Yes, certainly. And not only that, Brian, I think there has to be, people have to be responsible, essentially, and governments providing and provoking such sort of strikes. It's criminal beyond any description, essentially. Yes. So there is no regard to public health. There's no regard to environment. Not only for this is a long-standing problem. So if you understand what's been done, we do not know, at least not in our lifetimes. Essentially, that the effects won't wane off in our lifetimes, but further generations down. So this is almost a permanent damage we're doing. not only to human life, but to crops. So, these areas are the bread baskets for Europe. So we are actually polluting our own bread basket. So it's quite serious. Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Bisht, thank you very, very much for taking us through that. You've been kind enough to say you'll join us for UK Column Extra after the news, and we can discuss some of this in a bit more detail. And we're looking at putting up a UK Column symposia on the subject in due course. So thank you for that segment.
Okay,